Good afternoon. I'm Prudence Carter from Stanford University, and soon to be the University of California, Berkeley. We're now more than 60 years past the Brown versus Topeka, Kansas Board of Education Supreme Court decision. And equal opportunity has become a mantra in American society. In fact, it has become a mantra in this room today. Some efforts have attempted to create equal learning opportunities by increasing the racial composition and the ethnic diversity of schools. Other efforts have attempted to create these equal learning opportunities in racially isolated schools, ultimately returning to the separate but equal standard that preceded Brown. But studies show that low-income and racial and ethnic minority students fare better in schools that are racially and ethnically diverse. While diversity is a compelling, necessary, and critical reform effort to improve educational opportunity in our society, I stand before you today to say it is not sufficient to close opportunity gaps in education. I say that because diversity is not integration. Every day, educators unwittingly and often unconsciously reproduce the boundaries between students and social divisions through their practices. Several years ago, I went back to high school for several months with a research team. I wanted to understand how is it that African American and Latino students who share a social and economic background would fare in different contexts of schooling. One of those schools was a very affluent school that sent more than 90% of its students to college. But most of the students of color actually didn't go to college. And I recall a day when I was visiting that the students and the educators had been a part of an assembly program. And afterwards, I was asked to debrief with this group of students. I put my sociologist hat on. We went through concepts like race and ethnicity and gender and talked about social difference. And after that conversation, I overheard an African American boy turn to his peer and he uttered, "She's so smart, and she looks like me." He was incredulous, and I was sobered. Now think about that for a moment. He had no model of intelligence in his school that looked like him. And if it were the case for him, imagine what it was like for the white students and the Asian students and the Latino students in that school as well. Over the last decade and a half, I've been conducting research that I believe we must consider if we want to understand the opportunity gaps within schools as well. We've been talking about the material context differences between schools, that is, the differences in finances and resources and teacher quality. We know that that creates vast opportunity gaps. There's also the sociocultural context. And these are the invisible and the intangible forces that are harder to see, that are harder to pick up in data sets and on surveys, where researchers like me who go into schools every day can see them in operation as we sit into classrooms and observe teachers and students. Here's what I've observed in terms of the sociocultural context and the opportunity gaps that can manifest inside of them. Opportunity gaps manifest in the sociocultural context of schooling when educators often signal to students who's in and who's out, often through the visual aids, through the pedagogical tools, through the things that they say. Opportunity gaps manifest themselves in schooling when we see students who are assigned to high-track classes or high-status classes versus the regular classes, as students say, and that's all marked along social lines like race and ethnicity and class. Opportunity gaps occur in schools when we see that students are actually participating in extracurricular activities like Model UN and debate and band and orchestra. And that is to some groups as basketball and football, or stepping or language clubs are to other groups. Meanwhile, these course activities and these extracurricular activities are important conduits to the sharing of information and the building of ties among students. Don't you want a society for your children and for our youth where these palpable social divisions no longer exist in our society and in education? Well, what do we have to do about it? I believe that we have to get to true education. And by doing that, what we need to do is not only diversify the student populations in our schools, we need to revive that. But we also need to diversify the worker or the education teaching force. And in the process of that, we deny within school segregation by denying racialized and class-based tracking. And we also need to deepen teacher education training so that our educators know how to be facile with teaching students who come from very disparate backgrounds than their own. I believe in true integration if we want to have a country that's whole. I believe that in order to get there, however, we need to revive our commitment to developing a well-trained teacher corps that will enable all students to believe that they belong, and indeed, that they can be smart too. Thank you.